When humanity learned of the galaxy at large, it wasn't long before humans decided to join up with the group, the coalition forces. And when they did, it wasn't long at all before soldiers began to join in their military. And when they did, the coalition forces really didn't think much of them. They believed that these were just a new species, and what's going to happen is what always happens. Always the new species trying to push themselves. They're overzealous. They rush in. They get hurt constantly, and they need other species to cover them. And it just gets annoying. Everyone thinks the same thing with humans. Everybody keeps saying the same thing. There's no way they're going to keep up with training. This was a well-worn sentiment, as all other new species have always done the same thing. Always. It didn't matter. And humans, well, they look similar to a few others. When the humans arrived, they all looked similar. They all moved similar. They all talked through one. Not only did they look like it, but most of the other species, except for a few species that were similarly shaped to humans, like the dangles, couldn't tell humans apart one from the other. The humans all moved in unison when they needed to, which made everyone believe that humans were actually a hive mind species, and no one wanted to be around one of those, especially since they were already fighting with the Unities, the other hive mind species in the universe. To this point, all they've been able to do is keep this Unities species in check. And in check is the best you can do when fighting against a hive mind anyway. Especially one that wants to absorb everyone else into their own collective. However, it turns out, to everyone's shock, humanities are not a hive mind. They were just very disciplined. On top of that, everyone found out that the uniform movements they were doing as they moved in their formation was simply for ease of moving large groups through small areas, making sure everyone got to where they needed to go. This made everybody take a collective breath as they realized, okay, not a hive mind species, but let's see what they can do. The coalition forces put them into training and found out very quickly that the humans adapt. They adapt to everything. They adjusted instantly to different type of environments, from cold to hot to wet to dry. It didn't matter. They were able to deal with each of them, sometimes just pulling out one piece of equipment or simply continuing, not seeming to care that they are now absolutely drenched, and now they still have to keep walking. The humans turned out to be very quick to repair themselves and simply continue, as they've all been, as they say, juiced up with all sorts of nanomachines and different type of what they call CRISPR that makes it almost impossible to kill one. In some cases, they lost a digit or a limb and they just kept going. And everyone would watch as this creature, this human, would simply continue to eat food, and they would watch as the limbs slowly grew back over a time. This was absolutely crazy, and every time they saw a human lose something and get an injury so damaging that this would require immediate medical aid, rushing them to a facility to make sure that they would survive, the humans would just say the same thing: rub some dirt on it, and they would continue. A few of the instructors decided to make sure that the humans didn't have adequate rest, and they expected the humans to only go for a few hours, then needing to go into their hibernation cycle or something, or need to stop to get more H2O or something. But the humans would continue to just keep going, and they would train all day, even when the other species were completely exhausted, had to lay down. In some cases they would fall asleep, yet the humans would train all day and all night if they had to, and they would keep going. It didn't matter if it was the simplest training as some sort of reflex drill. They would go until their muscles absolutely screamed so loud that you could actually see the arms shake, and shake violently as they just hung there. When asked, the humans would say, "Oh, we don't train till we get it right. We train until we cannot get it wrong." And when asked, they said, "Well, our lives depend on it." Duh. Not only was the human endurance scary for most, but the strength as well. It seemed as though every human they saw carried more than anyone expected. Each time the humans left for even a training mission, they would carry certain items that were inspectable by their own chain of command. They had to have these. However, when asked, every human would always carry them regardless. Along with these items, they always brought even more ammo than they needed, which they call the secret to life. Even though the extra ammunition and extra items were almost never needed on every single mission. Usually, the mission only required them to carry half of the loadout, but the humans carried everything. Eventually, one of the commanders walked up and asked one of the human sergeants why they carry all that. He only got the response, "Better to have and not need than need and not have, right?" Hooah! Was all he got in response. However, this response was looked at as kind of a joke, really. Many of the other forces looked at the humans as ridiculous for carrying all these items. However, these items saved them all, as there was a surprise waiting for them when they dropped onto the battlefield of the planet Monkey Butt, where even the smallest hygiene items the humans brought kept entire units from being combat ineffective. As it turned out, the flora on the planet made even the reptilian pinyais itch all over. The enemy had such an issue with the flora that they temporarily lost contact with the hive mind. Kind of difficult to concentrate on sending a mental message when you're itching so bad you're willing to scratch the skin right off of your body along with the muscle attached to it. This actually allowed the coalition forces to seize the planet with far less casualties than they ever expected. After this, there was an issue discovered between the humans, the Dangles, which was a humanoid species, and another humanoid-type species called the Puchiliks. Since they're all similar looking, at least on the outside, everybody thought there would be animosity between them, like bad feelings. Instead, they found out that the three species were simply trying to show off to each other. However, it wasn't clear why from the outside, though eventually the non-humanoid species were told that each of these three species consider each other visually stimulating, which might lead to issues in the future. However, nobody had time for that, at least not right now. Since the humans had actually been taking out of their basic training to take care of the mission on Monkey Butt, they had to go back and actually finish their training, and there was only one more exercise that needed to be taken care of. This was one that nobody looked forward to, as there is one type of terrain through all of the universe that no one wants to face. It's affectionately called the Death Tunnel. It's normal that you would face a tight corridor, especially when going from ship to ship combat. If someone's trying to board your ship or you're trying to board theirs, trying to take a space station and or trying to hold it. And sometimes even subterranean facilities, you need to be able to handle this. And everyone simply looked at the humans and had a bit of pity in their eyes for what was coming. Yet the humans saw this and they laughed. They laughed heartedly at this. When asked why they found it so funny, the humans said, "Oh, this should be fine. As long as we get past the fatal funnel, we should be fine." That fatal funnel made everybody confused, but eventually they found out that it was whatever breach, whatever doorway, wherever the humans were coming forward through. But they had to take the tunnel at least 3 times, and they could not take it the same way. And if they failed once, they might be sent back to the beginning of basic training. However, the humans simply looked and goes, "Nah, we got this." They would face the tunnel the first time as they walked up with the door open. Inside were drones, biomechanical drones that would act and move like any other biologicals. You could shoot them, you could blow them up, and people would just 3D print new ones, and the humans knew they had to get through. However, these drones would be firing back. They did have weapons that would not kill you, but they're sure gonna hurt like hell. they'll actually latch onto you, grow across in a type of crystalline structure, and then lock solid, actually turning into a type of crystal almost as hard as diamond. However, when it does this, it usually squeezes the appendage really, really hard. And if you get caught in the face too many times, well, you might find your brains oozing out your ears, and nobody wants that. The first time the humans lined up, and they moved in a strange way. 2 columns, one on each side, and stopped at the edge. One at the edge simply looked forward, raised his fist into a motion up high, and then flashed his hand open once or twice, and then moved his hand forward in a strange motion. Nobody could figure out what was going on. What was this? Then another couple humans came up. They ran past and threw something down the tunnel as they ran past. The drones fired back, but they couldn't fire at anything because the humans were already out of the way. What was going on? Then all of a sudden, a loud boom was found inside. Then a second, and a third, and a fourth. All of these concussive forces were enough to make all the drones simply reach for their auditory sensors and move in ways that they couldn't understand what was going on. They couldn't figure out what the fuck was going on as they completely started scrambling around. They couldn't see anything. Their visual sensors were completely shot. Optics sometimes fried. If they were too close to the explosion, some of these were not just there to disorient, but they were there to completely destroy, and many drones were torn apart. Before they even had a chance to deal with anything, they were immediately cut down. The human charged down the death tunnel, which was at least 100 meters long. They fired and shot and fired and shot and kept going and kept going. If one was hit, everybody just hurtled over them and kept going, firing more and more and more. But by the time they got halfway through, they had to stop on the side. And once again, they threw explosives down. And once again, they disoriented the drones. And the drones simply fell in waves off to the side. And the humans just carried out their wounded later at a very slow pace, asking, "Was that it?" Later on, the humans had their second go-round, and they could not use the explosives, and everyone wondered what they would do next. This time, the humans went up to the front, and they had a lot of armor, entirely encapsulating the body in a very robust shell. But that was not all. In front of them was a shield, a very large shield. The hallway was just wide enough that you could have them walking staggered, one in front of the other, about 45 degrees away from each other, and they could walk down this hallway. They couldn't use the explosives, so what were they going to do? As those in front with the shields nodded with each other, they simply turned the corner and both got in the way and continued to advance down the hallway. The drones fired like crazy, doing nothing but impacting and bouncing off the shields, sometimes striking the shoulders of just barely any of the encapsulated humans, but they just kept going. It seems as though that armor was completely resistant to whatever was being thrown at it, because every time it went around the armor and struck something like the shoulder, it would simply splat onto the side, begin to expand like it normally would, and then it would harden very tight like carbon. Yet once it did that, it simply shattered under its own pressure and fell to the ground. All the humans were behind these shields as they moved forward. Every time one of these shields got close to any of the drones would try to reach around and immediately find a barrel looking right at them, catching many slugs right to the face, and they dropped. The humans with the shields simply walked forward, not seeming to care about anything, only looking through little bitty slots on the shields themselves to make sure they're walking straight forward, and, in one case, splatting one of the drones to the side, or simply pushing them over and stepping on them with their giant metal feet, crushing them underfoot. The humans this time walked out the other side of the death tunnel with 0 casualties. This result surprised many. However, there was 2 different species, the Dangles and the Puchiliks, and they were very interested in the humans, as both of these species, well, let's just say that strength was something that got their attention. The next go-round, the final show of what humans could do to show that they were strong enough for anything that the universe has to throw at them, especially when it comes down to a certain unity species. They had to take this tunnel, but they could not use shields this time. They could not use the exoframes. They could not use the explosives, and everyone wondered what they would use. They looked at the humans as each of them were now carrying some sort of strange weapon. They'd never seen this weapon before, and they were told that this weapon was specific for close quarters combat. This was the most effective weapon they had for this type of situation. Everyone looked at the kind of strange weapon. It wasn't bulbous out to the side, it was a bit tall. Each of them had some sort of round canister attached to the bottom, a hard canister. They looked and the ammo was red with some sort of brass on the back. Everyone loaded up this canister, reached up to the top, cocked it back in the open bolt position, and everyone watched and waited as this time the humans once again gave hand signals, and before anybody knew what was going on, those on either side of the tunnel began to push through, and the AA-12s opened up with the 35-round drum magazines and just boom, 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 boom on one, and right next was another, firing all the double-aught buckshot down, tearing the drones apart, and each time somebody ran out of ammunition, they simply moved over to the side, took a knee, reloaded, and didn't get up until their buddy at the back of the line grabbed them to lift them up. There was a constant wall of lead firing down the hallway, and before the drones even knew what was going on, they were struck even by a graze, by a ricochet, or by direct fire that began to tear them to pieces. The humans began to walk through, just tearing everything apart, and got to the other side covered in drone goop. Once again, no humans were lost on this. Only one took a stray hit, and that was all. They continued forward, and before they even had a chance to get everybody out of the end of the tunnel, one of the observer controllers walked up and said, "Damn, those things are loud." And question, is that what you humans call the boomstick? The humans kind of looked at each other, looked down at their full automatic shotguns and said, "Well, these aren't quite boomsticks." Well, they are, but they're more like boomsticks on steroids. The other observers came over and said, "That's very interesting. I do have another question." "Yeah, sure, what do you got?" Where can I buy one of those?" Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me today on this short story that shows off the Boomstick 2.0. Before I go, I need to send out some special thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those will be MTF Guard, Erica Gem, Douglas Scarborough, Guardian Sage, SS Demon, Brian Kemp, and Prozac and Pancakes. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.